Lights out and welcome to the Championship Lap, your front row seat, everything Formula One, every race, every headline. We're here to talk about it all. So buckle up, you're listening to the Championship Lap, the F1 podcast. Hello, guys. It's been a little bit of time since we've done an episode. We very nearly didn't do one for this race, but luckily we've managed to cram it in, which is really good because it was a very exciting race, wasn't it? So yeah, I'm glad that we were all free to chat about it. Um, Obviously, we're talking about the Canadian Grand Prix. I thought we would just briefly mention the sprint. Chris, you had some thoughts on the sprint quali that you want to get off your chest, I
Yeah,
think.
we've done sprints now for a few years, and I just don't know about you guys, but I was looking at again just now. The top five from sprint quali was exactly the same order as qualifying. And if we're already sort of kind of trying to do something different that we've done before in the past, with kind of essentially what I'd say is almost like traversing F1, like let's get more races and more things and more content. Let's do something different, right? Like, is it just me that gets really bored by sprint qualifying, or kind of finds it kind of like a kind of a underwhelming? Because it kind of just it's essentially just previews the real thing, you know? I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you guys think?
I
Because
think
I'm
may I think maybe
a bit
they
bored
do
by it.
it because there's no other format in it to determine who would start the sprint. So it's a tricky one. I see what you're saying. I guess they're trying to get more eyeballs on the screens, aren't they? And maybe to counter that argument, I had a little look at the stats for the sprint race itself. I was quite shocked. On YouTube, guess how many people watched the condensed YouTube highlights of just the sprint on the F1 channel? Guess how many? Megan, do you have a number?
Honestly, no idea. So I'm actually quite curious to hear about
Okay, it's
the numbers on that.
8.4 million people watched the sprint
Mhm.
condensed race highlights, which I was quite surprised by because I thought no one really cared about it. So Chris, maybe
But
they're on something. I don't know.
I would say that I don't. If you're gonna go for it, go for the sprint. But I don't see why you wouldn't do that. Say like one shot qualifying. Why wouldn't you do like? I don't see the point of doing three like a classic the same format. If you're gonna
Sure.
do sprint or like a reverse grid or I don't know, just experimenting with stuff. Like we're already sort of kind of it's not really that many points we're playing with. That top eight points overall. It's only 1 point per position. The top eight. So like you might as well try something different, something that's gonna because otherwise I just find that with sprint qualifying, it's like, well, we're just essentially kind of ruining the big main event, which is, one of the best parts of the weekend for me, which is qualifying. Like I just feel like otherwise why don't we try something else? Like, or like I don't know, you only have one 5 minute round of qualifying. You have only time to put one lap in, or two if you were the same time. I don't know, something different. Just like if we're going for sprints, I'm all for it. Fine, let's do something different. But let's actually kind of try and do something a bit
Are
more
you,
revolutionary. I'm just a bit bored by it otherwise.
are you suggesting, Chris, a little bit like in the NBA when they do that weekend of like trick shots? So
Yeah,
what you want to see
almost.
is the cars going over ramps, over jumps.
Sure,
Is that what you're
why
saying?
not? Or backwards or something. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe not to that extent, but you know what I'm saying? Like, let's do like a one show, or no, like let's do like you start off with the two Aston Martins going, you go in the order of the rankings, and you see
Free
which one do
wheels.
with one lap or something. Do you know? I don't know, like, or you go in alphabetical order or something, or you do
Okay.
something a bit different because otherwise it's just like, what are we doing? We're just doing the same thing again and again.
Megan, what do you think on the sprint itself and the qualies that Chris has mentioned?
Well, I know that they said that obviously it was the first ever sprint qualifying that we've had in F1. I do think that they're trying to just create new things in F1 to make it more enticing for new people to obviously grow their fan base and everything.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that's qualifying is necessary for sprint. Um, but that's just my honest take on that. But I guess it's more screen time for the drivers as well,
Yeah.
like more screen time in general. It was entertaining for a bit, but I mean, like Christian said, it was like a very similar turnout to the final like top six spots
Do you
in the
do you
sprint
think
race.
do you think Megan maybe and obviously you're from the US and obviously a lot of the races now happen in the US. Are they maybe trying to cater to more of a US market and maybe that is seen as enticing to certain demographic of the racing community and maybe that's why they're kind of testing these things at the sprint and maybe not just US, but like I was saying earlier, maybe it's the young eyeballs and like obviously the sprint is what 23 laps or it was for this race. It's a condensed version. They're trying to yeah, keep people watching, and this is seen as like the next step. I slightly concerned maybe that the sprint might replace the real race. I hope that's kind of not the kind of narrative. Like, they're talking football about shortening the half to 30 minutes because of people's attention span. I would worry. I'd only hope that they wouldn't replace the main race with a sprint version. That would be my only concern. But yeah, we'll have to see, won't we? In terms of the sprint itself, oh, sorry, qualifying. You were going to say as well, Chris, was there anything else you want to mention about the sprint qualifying, apart from obviously your strong feelings on the
Yeah, no, I
on
mean,
maybe it
apart from
being
that,
no, okay.
being the Alonsista that I am, finally seeing
Okay.
him outside a Q3 session was nice, only for him to crash. So I guess
Yeah,
but same old, really. Yeah, not much else to say.
fair enough. Well, the sprint itself, obviously, Russell was first in qualifying for the sprint. Finished P1 for the sprint race too. Lando had a very good sprint weekend, not a good race weekend. We'll get onto the main race later. But yeah, for once, actually, it was quite a good start from the Mercedes. They're sort of learning their lessons from the starting grid, both 1-2 off the line. Managed to stay that way for a little bit, which was good to see. They've had a few problems. That's been probably their only issue this season, apart from maybe some of the infighting between George Russell and Antonelli, which again we'll get onto later. Um, yeah, how do we feel the sprint itself was? Chris, maybe you're going to be slightly biased, but yeah, what did you make to the sprint race?
Well, it was a nice change of pace in the sense of I find that a lot of the previous sprint races have been, I mean, I remember one in Austin last year was quite good, but overall not as competitive. You don't have as much kind of time to have sort of these kind of tire degradation overlaps and stuff. Whereas you actually really felt like, oh, we're seeing the two Mercedes go for each other. And I was a bit worried. I think I mentioned in the first episode that what is the level that Kimi's going to come with now that he's got a title winning car? I was a bit let down, to be honest, by his first season. I thought I was expecting a bit more. I know he's a rookie, etc., but I didn't expect the gap to be as massive with George in his first year. But to actually see him go for it and make moves that, I think most drivers in that situation wouldn't have tried to, and having that kind of full frontal 1v1 was actually a lot of fun, and it was enjoyable. Actually, it's one of the few sprint races I think I've really enjoyed since they've introduced it a few years ago, and it gave us a few controversial moments, like that kind of turn one moment that we saw between George and Kimi, which
Yeah.
I think, by the way, George was completely should have got definitely a 5 second for that one. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Megan. Obviously, Chris has mentioned obviously the fighting between Mercedes there. Toto on the radio had to sort of interject and sort of tell Kimi to concentrate on the driving and not on the radio moaning. And then Russell was moaning back. And then again at the finish, Kimi was told off again by Toto. Yeah, Megan, what do you make to the sprint kind of infighting that we saw? Obviously separate to the main race.
Well, I will say, like you'd said earlier, Mercedes had a really strong kind of opening to the sprint race. I think that the fighting is also starting to stem from the fact that George is getting a bit more competitive at the fact that his younger teammate, he's been here for so much time, is really outperforming him this season.
Yeah.
And I mean, we saw quite a bit of fighting, like they had contact on, I think it was lap 6, and Kimi went off and then regained position, and he ended up battling Norris for the majority of the
Yeah.
sprint race. I do think it stems down to that sort of, it's almost like the Oscar Lando situation of last year, but now it's happening at Mercedes between both teammates starting to have that sort of competitiveness against one another.
Yeah, I mean it's healthy for the sport, isn't it? I mean, yeah, you mentioned obviously the Norris and Antonelli fighting. I mean, right at the death. But I think Antonelli lost his grip on the outside of the hairpin going into Casino Straight. So that's how it finished. P1 to George Russell and P2 for Norris. So yeah, a bit of nostalgia for Norris there. We'll move on now to the main race qualifying. Hopefully, Chris, you can accept main race qualifying. You're not a
Yes, yeah, of
griping on
course.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So obviously we had Q1. Obviously, Ocon was very untidy in Q1 into the final chicane. He was a tenth slower than his teammate, which is slightly concerning, isn't it? Going
It's not looking
into
good for Ocon, is it? It
no,
really isn't looking good.
he's been one of those sort of indifferent drivers for a while, hasn't he? So yeah, it's not looking good. Alonso again, someone else not looking good, up to 18th. I was trying to be
Nice.
optimistic because obviously we've now got what 24 cars on the track. Um, Bortoleto up to 16th. So there was more misery for Ocon and Audi uh, make making the next part of qualifying. And yeah, it was bad qualifying in Q1 for Albon, Aston Martin, Ocon, as we mentioned, and the Cadillacs. Now, I thought we don't really give much airtime to the Cadillacs. I feel slightly awkward asking Megan as the American presenter we've got on the pod, but I will ask you, Megan, Cadillacs from an American perspective how are they deemed back home? Because it's been a little bit embarrassing, or am I being a bit harsh given it's their first time back in Formula One?
Well, I mean, as we've kind of discussed on the podcast before, I think it is a bit tricky to kind of develop a car that's going to compete with, the other cars that have been just performing so well, and in such a short period of time because they only started developing the car around,
Mm.
last year. And that's a very quick turnaround to get a car together, that's going to be able to compete with, McLaren's, Mercedes, the Ferraris, essentially. I think, I mean, talking to some people back home that are very into F1,
Yeah.
they just view it kind of as the car's driving like a tractor. And I mean, we've discussed that on the podcast as
Mhm.
well. It's just not performing the way
No.
I think either driver or the team itself wants to happen on the track.
Yeah. And also,
It's pretty unreliable too, right? That Cadillac.
sorry, yeah,
I mean,
Karen.
it's most races, at least one of them haven't finished. I mean, what was it to Checo going into boxes? All of a sudden, just front suspension just broke in half halfway down the. I mean, it's they've got to try and focus right now on trying to finish a couple of races with two cars right now. I mean, I don't think anyone's expecting Cadillac to be top of the pops by any means its first year at all, but it is really, really off the pace. And I'd especially say that Bottas in particular, he's been really off it. I mean, he got
Yeah.
lapped, was it four times in the race itself, and even most qualifying races, qualifying sessions as well behind Checo as well.
Maybe he did an interview before, I think it was the Australian Grand Prix, where Sky interviewed him, and he's now opened a holiday home in Australia. I don't know if you've seen this on a wine resort. I think I sent it to Megan before. Maybe he should concentrate less on the Airbnbs and more on the Formula One. I'm not really sure it's working out quite as he'd hope. But yeah, we'll have to see how obviously Perez and Bottas get on this season. It does feel a little bit like when a very well, how do I say this? Cristiano Ronaldo went to the Saudi leagues. It
Sure,
does feel a
I
bit
see where
that
this is
vibe
going.
of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
maybe just retire. Maybe don't. Maybe give
yeah.
another driver a chance who's up and coming. Because obviously, we've seen obviously Behrman, right, who has been doing great things at Haas. To give a young driver a chance, I think is important for the future of the sport. And maybe Cadillac will learn that lesson that maybe what they should have done in hindsight is get one experienced driver, let's say a Perez or a Bottas, and then put in someone next to them who is like a rookie up and coming. So yeah, maybe they'll learn some lessons from that going forward. But yeah, we'll just move on to
Just building
Keith.
off that
Sorry.
quickly, I would say that the thing about Bottas as well is that unlike Perez, yeah, he was disappointing at Red Bull, but he had been in a top team quite recently and only had 1 year out. Whereas Bottas had
True.
sort of already a sort of a decline near the end of his Mercedes years. I mean, that 2021 year was really poor. He was so off it. And then he went down to Sauber, and even at Sauber, he had one half of the season that was okay, and the other few years weren't great. And then he had a year out, and now he's coming back. I mean, it really sort of you can for me like they're both kind of what I'd say
Look,
is solid F1 careers, but Bottas is really on kind of a steady decline over years. The Bottas one confused me when they signed him for sure.
look, Chris, it's very tiring, putting this winery together and making sure everyone feels
It's
comfortable in the holiday
all
let
the
and
corkscrews, man. You got to get
make
all the bottles and everything. It's a lot of effort. Yeah, yeah,
making
yeah.
sure the
Getting the
rooms
right
are
grapes.
clean and like you just
Yeah,
have to make sure your guests are happy. So he's got a lot on his plate, okay? He needs
putting together
to
good Chardonnay isn't easy. Okay,
yeah,
good
exactly.
rosé. You know,
Anyway, moving on. So Q2, it was nice to see Hamilton up to P2 briefly. Obviously Gasly was out in Q2, starting the race from 14th. However, My number one driver that I love to talk about on this podcast, I think I've mentioned him the most so far, and we'll get on to his race performance as well. Colapinto, once again, up to 10th, which is super impressive. I'm really pleased for him. He had a great Q2 and Q3. Obviously Norris briefly starting from P1. Mercedes at the start were struggling at the start of Q3. So yeah, that was kind of it for Q3. I mean, obviously George was delighted on the radio comms, wasn't he, to finish P1 for the main race. So that kind of boded well uh, for the main event on the Sunday. So yeah, I think that was kind of it from quali. Obviously Hamilton up to fifth, and it boded well, obviously, for the race itself, which we'll now get to. What the hell happened? Now that we're talking about the race itself, what the hell happened at the start? By the way, guys, Megan, obviously Lindblad stalled. Kind of crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like really just like what was going on. Like I was watching, I was like, are they going to move him off the track? Like, are they going to get the marshals to come and get him off the track? And then they kept, executing the formation laps to until that start happened. But I know they were talking about it was just the fact that he couldn't get into first gear,
Yeah,
and
I think he
that
stalled,
ended
didn't he?
up,
Yeah,
yeah, it just wasn't working out. It was kind of disappointing because he had a decent weekend, I would say, leading up to the race. I was actually quite excited to see how he would do, especially since he is a rookie. I It just didn't work out for him.
yeah.
They just couldn't get it together, so he obviously couldn't start on that front line going
Lucky
into the
as well
race.
that clearly the comms were working on all of the cars because imagine if someone had actually race started. The lights obviously I think went full red but then didn't go green, did they? So I guess just lucky. I mean, some people had a few false starts at the beginning, but it is fortunate no one crashed basically. Yeah, it was kind of mad. I haven't seen that for a long time in Formula One. Um, Not since they changed. I don't know if you remember, there was a few years ago when there was some cheating. I think it was from a Renault car where they'd worked out the light system. Do you remember that? And
Rings
they
a
like
bell.
they tricked the F1 uh referees like tricked them and like made sure they knew they were cheating, which is kind of crazy. I'll have to send you the clip, but yeah, it's kind of mad. But yeah, those things don't happen very much in Formula One these days. But yeah,
Talking about the start, actually, because
go
there
for it.
obviously because of that false start, there was a couple extra formation laps. What the hell are McLaren doing? Had the intermediate tires on, thinking it was going to rain. They get two additional laps to see that it isn't raining. It's not going to rain. The drivers are telling them it's not going to rain. Change the tires. They don't feel right. They have plenty of time to do it. And sure, you're starting from the pits, but you know for a fact that you're going to have to do a box immediately after one or two laps, and you don't do it. When you have literally the
Well,
free opportunity to go and change them. Can someone please try and explain this to me? Because I'm still baffled by like you have two additional laps to check this out, and you don't do it.
I think
It's
their logic was they were on the intermediates, weren't they, at the start, and then I think Norris did get off to a good start once the race actually did begin. So in the short term, it made sense, but he didn't get off. He didn't fly ahead further enough to gain the advantage. So yeah, it was poor decision making, and yeah, like you said, um, Piastri into lap two goes into the pits, changes tires. What I've written here. So yeah, it was poor, wasn't it, Megan?
Yeah, like I just thought it was really odd because you looked at the majority of the grids, and obviously, like Christian brought up, like the McLarens both started on inters, and then everybody around them in that top seven spots were starting on softs, and then the middle was middle of medium tires, and the rest was soft. So it was just kind of weird to see why they weren't, I don't want to say not copying other people, but sort of taking a lead as to what everybody else was doing. Because obviously there's a risk of rain, but like Christian said, it didn't end up raining. And Oscar bailed at the end of that first lap to swap out the tires because he was like, this is obviously not smart.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it obviously didn't bode well. I mean, I've written later in lap eight, obviously the McLaren strategy, wrong tyres, and they did it anyway, like you were saying. And the car's obviously been poor as well. I think, Megan, you sent me quite a funny screen grab of Norris's, is it Twitter page where he was talking about what did he say on his
Oh,
Twitter page?
oh yeah. So I mean, I guess this kind of this was his crash out, I guess, just because of how this is going for him. But he basically changed his Instagram bio at the end of
Instagram,
the
sorry, yeah.
race. Yeah, yeah. No, he changed his Instagram bio at the end of the weekend. It was like, I am a world champion in quotes, like me to myself in the mirror. So like I guess he's just kind of starting to tweak
Uh,
out a little bit based on how his season is going.
He's gone full high performance podcast mode, gets up at 4 a.m. every
uh,
morning, does a workout. He's
100
done by
push-ups.
12 p.m.
Yeah, yeah.
He
Dunked his
then
head in
sees
a bunch of ice. Yeah.
yeah, he sees
Hmm.
his girlfriend for 30 minutes for the allotted period that he's allowed to see
Yeah.
her, and then he goes back to sleep 5 hours. He is a full high
Red light
performance.
glasses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's going down that vibe. It's slightly worrying. Anyway, we'll move on from that. It was fun to obviously we mentioned Norris is on intermediates, and Antonelli was gaining on Norris on the soft tyres into lap two. Then obviously Norris pitted, and it gave Antonelli the lead into lap three, which kind of gave us the big narrative of the race, which was for a period, which was a shame to see it finish early because I was really enjoying it, and it sounded like you guys were too. George Russell and Antonelli. They started their dance together. They were fighting between pole position, much like they did in the sprint. Russell took the lead and then locked up from Antonelli into lap seven. There was more lock up from Kimi. It was kind of back and forward, wasn't it, with that kind of dance for the whole of that period. Yeah, it was literally a sort of repeat of the sprint into turn 13 into 13, the Wall of Champions. I mean, they could have easily crashed, couldn't they, Chris? Quite early on. I mean, a few times, really. I mean, the amount of lockups as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys both mentioned the McLaren battle last year, but I'll say for me, this is like a different kettle of fish. Like last year, I think, considering how close the two were, how it came down to last few races, I was a bit let down by the papaya rules system. That came a bit too sort of, oh God, God forbid we try and race each other. God forbid we try and push the limit. Whereas this, I really love the fact that Toto was kind of gave us the chance to see two drivers go back and forth for what, almost 30 laps, kind of almost like I said, pushing each other to the absolute limit. Kimi, look, he's a bit wild sometimes. He sometimes makes moves where you're a bit like questionable, but I love it. I love it's just such a spectacle to watch. It's just great to see you see that kind of like it reminds you of sort of like those early Verstappen years where like you're just like, God, why are you throwing yourself in that corner? You've got a 90% chance of flying to the car ahead of you, but you're just gonna do it anyway. And then you just fingers crossed it's gonna work out. It just keeps it such a spectacle, so much fun to watch. I mean, it's that first half of the Grand Prix is one of the Grand Prix I've enjoyed the most watching the last couple of years. It really was so much fun. Like you said, it's a shame that kind of a mechanical issue at the end kind of breaks it down and what that implies for the championship. But still, I think it was a great race. It was a really, really
Yeah.
fun first half of the race for sure.
Megan, what were your thoughts on that kind of infighting between the Mercedes cars?
I mean, I totally agree. It was fantastic to see. And I mean, as we've kind of touched on, like George is obviously starting to realize, oh, I have to get my ducks in a row because, my 19-year-old teammate is essentially been outperforming me when it was supposed to be, the year of George Russell, as everybody had kind of predicted um, at the beginning of the season. But, like in the 20s laps, before George obviously had his really unfortunate incident. Like, I mean, you could just tell that Kimi was laying on the pressure because they were hitting like 200 on the straightaways. And George just had to pull out fantastic defensive moves in order to keep Kimi off of him. So I think it is Kimi really laying pressure on thick for George. And he has to get creative now because his teammates performing
Yeah.
quite well. And obviously that translates to really good competition on screen for obviously us and viewers, everybody.
I think as well it puts pressure. Kimmy's also putting pressure on audibly because normally I think Toto likes to keep all those kind of infighting disagreements, in-house, post-race in the meeting rooms. Kimmy is very much deliberately uh, on the comms, saying it how it is, how he feels, because he feels he's got a bit of leverage now. So it's gonna be really interesting how that builds the narrative for the rest of the season. But yeah, we'll just carry on with the rest of the race, and then we'll get back to that sort of Mercedes infighting later. But uh, it was a bit of a shame to sort of hear Hamilton in lap nine sort of shouting there was no power. He obviously did well to recover towards the end of the race. As we were saying earlier, lap 12, Norris was struggling on the mediums, sort of managed to get up to ninth, which again feels a bit indifferent, doesn't it? Um, and then yeah, I think the sort of lap that really summed up the McLaren race for me, and I've described it here as that his race was the pits, was the poor pit stop from Oscar in lap 13, changing the front ring after that crash with Albon. It was a second visit to the pits at that point. We were only on 13 laps, so yeah, really, really poor, wasn't it, from McLaren for this whole race weekend, you could argue. Um, Moving on, obviously we had a lot more infighting up to that point when, unfortunately, in lap 30, we had George Russell going out the race, gutting for him. Obviously, he was the fourth retiree of that race after Alonso, Albon, and Lindblad. I've written here, because I think it is, because obviously suffering from that sudden loss of power, the car just collapsing. It does feel a little bit of an ominous day for the championship, because Kimi is now 38 points ahead, I think. No, sorry, 43 points ahead.
I'd say, yeah,
Um,
43.
43 points. Yeah, Megan, I think as we were saying earlier, but just to touch on it briefly, the fact that George up to that point was showing race pace and was fighting against Antonelli. Okay, at times maybe not that cleanly, you could argue from both drivers, but do we still have a championship title race between the two drivers?
It's difficult to say. I mean, obviously, there's a part of me that would like to hope that George can kind of make a turnaround, but as of right now, it's really Kimmy just kind of sailing away with the points. Um, I mean, obviously, like James Allison, their tech director, had said that it was an engine kill, which essentially caused that failure in the battery for George. And I mean, you could see the disappointment on his face. Like we all saw it on the screens when he, came storming out of the car like he was fuming. Um, it would just have to be the rest of the races. He has to consistently outperform Kimi at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
no, I'd agree with you. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's still a lot of season to go. We've got almost, what, 15, 16 races left. So there is definitely time to pull it back. But the pressure on George now is huge. I mean, it's four races in a row that Kimi has won now. Against, like you said, the 19-year-old just outside of his rookie year. This is all built up to you now, kind of for him, his big year, George, to kind of break out, try and win this championship, what many thought he'd win quite comfortably, to have this pressure on him all of a sudden. And now it feels as if, again, don't be wrong, we could still have Kimi could have a race where just like George has had now, we get 0 points, etc. But if you're looking at the current way things are going, more likely than not, the points differential between both in each race will be maximum 6 points per race, and 43 is a lot to get through. Is a lot to get through. So we'll
Yeah.
have to wait and see. And again, it's still a long season, a long way to go. But I don't know. I feel like George, as a driver, and maybe he'll prove us wrong, but he is the kind of guy that when the pressure gets high in higher pressure circumstances, has not always dealt with it the best. I mean, I still very much remember that Singapore race where he was chasing down the lead with Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, and he just, last couple of races trying throwing it straight to the wall. So I want to see how George deals with this pressure now, and he's still got time to bring that lead down, but I've got my questions. I've got my doubts about him.
Fair enough. Um, well, I think we should move on now, just because Kimi then obviously I think that was a turning point in this race. Obviously, lap 31, Kimi Antonelli obviously took advantage of that virtual safety car, having seen his teammate out of the race, and that kind of cemented his position for the rest of the race. I don't think anyone was really fighting against him at that point. But yeah, we had a bit of midfield battle or kind of upper midfield battle. Lap 35, you obviously had Hadjar, who's not really been spoken about very much apart from his crash. Was it in quali in Miami? Had a bit of an indifferent time at Red Bull, like often the second driver does at Red Bull. Him and Hadjar and Leclerc, obviously in the Casino Straight, breaking late from Hadjar, and then lap 40, obviously Leclerc got the lead back from Hadjar to gain fourth position at that point in the race. I'm reading a lot of articles about the indifference of Ferrari at the moment, and they're building a commercial electric vehicle that I think is worth 780,000 euros or something, which did look impressive. And I think both Hamilton and Leclerc were driving this car, and it did look really cool. But do we feel that they're kind of taking their hands off the Formula One steering wheel a little bit, Megan, and maybe not throwing all their eggs into that basket?
I would say, honestly, like I don't think that their focus is completely off. I think it's just obviously one of their, I don't know if you will, like side quests that they do in their free time. I don't think that their attention span is too off because I would say like throughout the weekend, I mean, Charles ended up not having the greatest weekend. I would say it was like it was decent, but it wasn't the best that we've seen from him. Um, Lewis had a very good weekend overall, and obviously we can get to that in a little bit later, but his focus was really positive throughout the weekend. And I mean, when there were times on the radio, he would come on and he was like, guys, like, I've got this, like, just trust me, like, I can do this. Um, I don't think I don't think either one of them is really floundering as compared to like last year. It's like a very dramatic difference. I think they're still doing as best as they can. In comparison to like the Mercedes and the McLarens, I think they're doing still quite well overall.
Fair enough. Well, maybe they can just secretly put another one of their very powerful electric units into their Formula One car, and maybe they can cheat the system a bit. But
Should fly
yeah,
the Luce instead.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Obviously, in lap 40 as well. Obviously, we had a very sad sounding Lando Norris. Obviously, the gearbox broke, and that's kind of was the final nail in their race weekend, wasn't it? I felt like. Cadillac as well. Obviously, their car for Perez obviously also broke just before the pit entrance, kind of summed up their season as well. Um, and then again, another driver who had a poor race weekend for McLaren was Piastri, who was serving a 10-second penalty for that collision with Albon in lap 13. And then the race kind of came to life towards the end. Megan, you just mentioned it earlier about Lewis versus Max for Ferrari. Turn one, I've written here in capital letters, hammer time, because it did feel a little bit like old school Hamilton kind of fighting back. I love that. And also, there was a nice camera shot of Lewis Hamilton's mum, and she looked really ecstatic that he kind of had found some race fighting. But I was wondering whether it was more lack of fight from Max, or whether it was obviously we've got two extremely gifted, talented drivers. Chris, is it a balance between maybe Max not maybe fully having his head in the game for Formula One, or was it just pure racing craft from Hamilton?
Well, I'd say actually, I thought Max did an all right job on the defense on that front and in the battle because I think Red Bull quite clearly have the fourth quickest car.
Yeah.
I think it's quite actually quite clearly fourth compared to the next two, which are McLaren and Ferrari. It seem to be quite close to each other. I mean, just that adds to your kind of you guys' previous point, which I actually think that for what the main thing holding Ferrari back is their power unit. They clearly have a kind of chassis wise, all the data suggests that actually in the cornering, slow corners and stuff like that, they're one of the better, if not the best car. It's just the fact that in the straights, Mercedes just flies past with their kind of rocket ship of an engine. But and I would actually not be surprised if in Monaco Ferrari win. I would be not shocked at all if Leclerc or Hamilton in a kind of essentially no straight or very short straight circuit like that do very well. So overall, I mean, I think it was a good sign to finally see Hamilton in a good space at Ferrari. It's felt like a year and a bit of a lot of suffering, being well behind Leclerc at pretty much every single circuit, and to see him compete near the front, getting his second podium now of the season. It's
Yeah.
promising signs. I don't want to say that he's fully back just yet. It's a bit too early to say. I think we need to see this level of regularly competing with Leclerc at other circuits more often than not. But overall, I was a bit worried, to be honest, that we were kind of having our previously mentioned Bottas moment with Hamilton at Ferrari, and that
Yeah.
he was kind of on the decline, and it was going to be kind of a sadder ending where kind of a younger driver kind of puts him to the sword. I'm hoping that this year Hamilton can really show the driver that he's always been and actually compete right into the end. So yeah, it was a promising sign. I think Max did all right. I think considering what that car can do and the luck that he had with the kind of McLaren's going out, he did well. And Hamilton is finally on his way back. So yeah, it was fun. And at least we had something else to watch at the end
Yeah.
once Russell went out as well. Otherwise, it would have been a bit of a boring, sad ending to the race.
Exactly. I was going to ask you, Megan. Obviously, we've spoken about Lewis there. Obviously, he took the lead over Max Verstappen, who recently seemed slightly distracted by Formula One. Not necessarily a bad thing, but obviously he's competed in the 24 Hours of Nürburgring and the NLS Endurance Series driving a Mercedes AMG GT3, which is a cool car. He has stated he really enjoys kind of the old school racing as it offers a pure, highly competitive challenge away from F1. Do you think this is a genuine, real warning sign, Megan, that he is actually going to leave F1 soon? Or is he just kind of flirting with it to gain a new contract?
I would say he's kind of flirting with it a bit. Also, we have to look back at people like Fernando Alonso, who kind of had a stint away from F1 and
Well, he
did
left the
some,
sport entirely, didn't he,
yeah.
Alonso? So, yeah.
Well, like similar to that. I think also Max is his entire life is driving and racing cars. So I think even if he is flirting with other racing opportunities, I don't think necessarily that means that he's going to be leaving the sport yet. I think he's just honestly enjoying his time. And I mean, he's accomplished so much at his age already. I think honestly, it's just him doing his, stint of different activities. And honestly, let him, like he's accomplished so much. I mean, we've seen it, but I don't know. That's just how I feel. But if you guys think differently,
No, no, no. I think that's a valid point. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's easy to forget how young he is. I mean, he's still in his what is he mid-20s or late 20s? I mean, he's been in the sport for years now, and I think you kind of get used to him sort of being part of the furniture, don't you? So yeah, it would be as much as I've had a love-hate relationship with the driver over the years with Max, obviously having been a very big Hamilton fan, I think the sport would definitely lose something if he left. So let's hope that he's not attracted too much by Nürburgring and other endurance driving, and he stays in Formula One. Well, a driver that is trying to replicate Verstappen's career at the moment, obviously, is Kimi Antonelli, who has now won his fourth Grand Prix in a row. Does seem to be kind of stretching his lead out, obviously, of the championship. Um, he's just going about his business, isn't he, Chris? And just kind of like, okay, obviously, we mentioned earlier that infighting between him and George. It's not Kimi's fault that George's car collapsed, and he's just getting the job done, isn't he?
Yeah, I think this is the first race of these four wins where I've very much felt convinced by Kimi as a title challenger. I think if you look at Japan and Miami, even though he wins those races, it feels I want to go quite as far as kind of haphazard or lucky, but it does feel sort of like circumstances really went his way. That Russell had a couple strategy errors slash kind of unlucky VSCs and safety cars and stuff, and it feels as if kind of this is the first race like, oh no, I can go 1v1 with you. And frankly, for me, I think he showed more pace than Russell in both the sprint and the actual race, even though he finishes behind. Every time when it was Kimi against George, it felt as if Kimi was always right on the edge of him, and George was having to kind of hold him back,
Yeah.
not the other way around. And it felt like it was kind of, if Kimi was let to go, he would have gone. So I actually was very impressed by this. Obviously, he had a couple mistakes here and there. He's still very young. He's still a bit impulsive at times. He still sometimes makes moves where you're like, ooh, maybe not. But this is the first time where I think I see in him, oh, this could be a world championship level driver. This is a guy who could win the championship. We'll have to wait and see. This, like I mentioned before, with probably 3/4, 2/3 of the season left to go.
Yeah.
How will he do in those crunch moments? When there's only a few races left, when there's only a few laps left, but. this is sort of like a consecration for me of, oh, okay, we've got a real driver here. We've got a real challenger here.
Yeah, and his racecraft is coming. I mean, as you mentioned, obviously there was a few lockups, but he's getting better consistently. Maybe getting more used to certain track derogations and like the intricacies of the new car and the systems involved, obviously with the power unit. So yeah, he's doing remarkably well given those are all new to all of the drivers, and he is incredibly young. So yeah, it's very impressive to see. So yeah, we'll see how Kimi gets on for the rest of the championship. Obviously, as we said earlier, it was obviously nice to see Hamilton taking second. I think that's really fun. And obviously Max, Megan, you'd be delighted. Max back on the podium. The sport needs this. It's important to have the big names at the top of the. Okay, I know sometimes people say it's good to see rookies in podiums. The sport needs the big names consistently getting podiums. It brings eyeballs to the sport. And it only makes the lower drivers better, I think, and pushing up. So, yeah, I think it's important that we have that sometimes. Not every race, okay, granted, but you do need that sometimes. Nice as well. Quick mention as well to Lawson finishing in seventh, and obviously my guy Colapinto finishing in sixth, which wasn't really shown very much on the race because obviously we had an exciting, higher echelons of the race between George and Kimi for most of that race. But yeah, again, just consistently getting around sixth, seventh, eighth positions this season. Colapinto's having a fantastic season, and
Can I just
maybe
say
his
quickly about
go
Colapinto
go for it.
that there's two races now in a row that he's beaten Gasly both in qualifying and the race, and he beat him very comfortably as well. It was like 2.5 tenths, I think it was in qualifying. And sure, is sixth a bit lucky with the amount of kind of George and the two McLarens going out, maybe a little bit. But I think considering that his first full year in Alpine was rough. It was a really rough. You had
He's lucky to still be a
zero
driver, isn't he?
points.
He's lucky to
Yeah,
still be a driver, really.
I think he got a bit of luck there. I mean, I don't think he really, once he replaced Doohan, showed much more pace than what Doohan showed in that Alpine. And I think the commercial backing of him gave him the chance to finish that season off and start the next. But having those races behind him now and actually a bit more experienced, I think he's starting to show a bit more kind of the driver that's there. And it's these last two. I mean, I think today, well, not today, the last races specifically, he did show kind of, okay, he can both do well in qualifying and in a race, when it's a bit complicated, difficult circumstances happening, retirements, etc. Hold it down and get that position, get those kind of big points for an Alpine who will be hoping to kind of be top of the midfield.
Yeah, and it's just nice to see, like you said, someone that was doing so poorly last season be given a second chance or a third or fourth or a fifth chance, given how many mistakes were made last year. I think it was just good for the sport. Yeah, and it was just good to see a driver like Colapinto obviously coming back from his uh, 84 mistakes that he made last season. So yeah, it was just good to see that. But yeah, in terms of post race, obviously I think George gave quite an impassioned post race, seemed slightly frustrated. But the other one I wanted to speak about with you both before we sort of briefly touch on Monaco. We've got another preview episode, haven't we, Megan, for the Monaco Grand Prix coming soon. But the FI President Mohammed Ben Sulayem is proposing a removal of term
Yeah.
limits for positions as head of motorsport's governing body. The move would enable the 64-year-old Emirati, who was re-elected unopposed in December, as a result of a quirk in election rules that prevented anyone else from standing, to continue as president beyond the current 12-year limit. Under current rules, the presidential term is 4 years, and a person can stand for re-election twice, therefore completing a maximum of 3 terms. Now, I think this to me seems. I don't know if the word stinks comes to mind, but it doesn't feel right. It feels slightly off to me. Chris, you're nodding. What do you think on this?
It just feels gross. So in a sport that we already talk about, where it sort of feels like a very closed circle, that sometimes some shady stuff and some shady businesses get involved. So on top of that, the kind of the man on top of the chair, and kind of the number one in the throne, to be like, well, actually, but what if I run this forever? What if I was unopposed and actually just was the complete supreme overlord of this? How about we have a sprint race every weekend? How about I double my salary? It just feels like a power grab. It feels like if you want innovation and new things to happen in the sport, do we really want it to be another case of another Bernie to be there for 25 years and kind of with all the control in one man's hands and not have a natural transition of power? One thing is having someone for a bit of stability, see through a couple of regulation cycles, and nothing is someone to be sort of the head of competitive auto sport for the rest of his foreseeable life. I mean, what are we talking about here? Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Megan, what do you think on this?
I mean, I think it's quite interesting that that would even be considered because I mean, obviously, you want to look at new changes and new things that happen to Formula One if it stays in the position of one person. Obviously, where are, the new types of changes and new beginnings, I guess, for the sport going to take place if it's the same kind of routine thing over and over again? But what about you, Robin?
Yeah, I think it should be given to, you know, there should be a little bit more democracy about this. It does feel slightly smelly to me. I think there should be more than one candidate going for the role as well. I think that seems slightly odd that I think it was the quirk, as it was mentioned, as I said in that statement, the quirk in the election rules prevented anyone else from standing. I mean, it all just feels, as Chris was saying, just feels slightly odd. And I don't think it helps with integrity in sport. I think there's a lot of we could talk a whole episode about sports washing in sport as well, and how certain countries have benefited from using sport as a sort of soft power and political gain, all this kind of stuff. I don't think it's right. I think sport should be heralded as something a useful power for good rather than for, these soft power gains that some of these countries seem to use it for. So yeah, I think it sets a slightly dangerous precedent. I hope it can be fixed, but as Chris says, it does feel a little bit like we're getting a new autocratic leader like we had with Bernie all those years ago. So yeah, we'll have to see, won't we? I'm trying to stay positive. But yeah, we will see,
I
won't
think
we?
the more disappointing thing for me is that, all of us, we've been F1 fans for a long time. And with Bernie, it just felt like it was such a boys' club. It was so closed off of a sport that you really had to make an effort to be a fan of F1 back in the day.
Yeah.
Liberty comes in, you get the Netflix show, you get a new set of fans, you get new regulations, you get new drivers coming in. You're like, okay, finally the sport is opening up. It's really kind of going to be the premier thing that people are going to watch and maybe might compete with the likes of football and basketball. And it can be sort of a reference sport and not some niche little thing that we're hidden away in the corner, pushing our glasses up like, oh, did you see the lap time? Whatever. No, we're actually kind of becoming a more mainstream, interesting sport just for them to close it off all over again and just have some other Bernie 2.0 to just say, okay, I'm going to here for the next 25 years. I want to do seven more Abu Dhabi races in a season or whatever. It's just like,
Mm.
what's the point? What's the point of all these kind of last 10 years of F1? I'm just going to end up with another kind of dictatorial leader
Yeah.
again in charge of everything.
I think just to end on the point, I think, the world is in a very volatile spot, and the irony that, as Chris just mentioned, obviously there are quite a few tracks this year that have been suspended because sadly, obviously, we've got the war in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz and all of the danger around security for race goers, the race itself, and all these logistics that have had to move around. I think it does feel like a sort of turning point at the moment, and the world's in a funny spot, and we just need sport as a sort of hopefully we can use sport as a sort of movement for peace. And I just hope that it doesn't get slanted by things like this. So we will have to wait and see, I suppose. But yeah, just moving back to the racing itself, obviously we have got talking about the history of the sport, one of the most historic races in the calendar coming up next. One of my favorite, I think it does have to be a very purist race weekend to be enjoyed by some, but I really enjoy the pageantry, the traditional nature of it, everything about it. We've obviously got the very beautiful, scenic Monaco Grand Prix next. I just want to go around the room just quickly. We're going to do a nice sort of fun preview show as well for this race hopefully in the coming weeks before the race itself. But Megan, Monaco Grand Prix, what does it mean to you?
Well, I mean, similar to what you said, I think it's just a history of it. It's so well known, obviously, in the sport in itself. And obviously it's become such a big, it's almost like a show now, if you will, because it has like all the big stars come out. We have all these people come out to watch it because it's like it's the race of F1. Obviously besides like Silverstone and things like that. I just think it's the glitz, the glamour, it's Monaco. I mean, how could you not um find it to be one of the most memorable, fun, exciting. I mean, depending on who you're talking to about exciting races. Um, but yeah, I just absolutely adore Monaco as a race each year.
Yeah, Chris, what are your thoughts on Monaco?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it probably is the most iconic race in F1. I think it is. It's in the previous last two regulations. It has been that weird contrast of probably the most fun qualifying of the year with the most boring race of the year. Kind of two extremes from one day to the other. The kind of how tight the circuit is and how massive those old cars were. So that it was impossible to essentially overtake unless it was crazy kind of rainy conditions that we had a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But um, I'm interested to see how these new cars race around Monaco. It's still going to be obviously super difficult to overtake, but they are about half a meter kind of less wide. And they have a different power systems that mean that kind of you're going to have huge power disparities at certain points in the race. I'm just curious to see. I'm maybe being a bit too optimistic, but I'm hoping that the racing this year will be a little bit better. That we might see a bit more overtaking, we might see a bit more side to side, especially in sort of like that the tunnel and coming out of it into that sharp right hander. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm looking forward to it, but in a sort of a kind of a tentative way. Because it has been a bit of a I think the last 10 years or so with these massive yacht style cars that we've been having has been a bit of a boring race to watch.
Yeah, and in terms of just quickly to get your thoughts, Chris, who do you think will win this race?
You know what? I'll double down on what I said earlier in the last bit. I think a Ferrari will win, and if I had to pick one, I'd probably say Charles. I think this will be the first race that a Mercedes doesn't win this season. I think.
Nice. Okay, well that'll obviously be great for Ferrari and all their branding. They'll be delighted by that. Megan, who do you think is going to come out on top?
I I mean, a lot of people are probably saying Kimi at this point, but I don't recall last year how he performed at Monaco. Um, Obviously he has a lot of pressure on his shoulders right now. Having that kind of lead in the championship. So it will be quite interesting to see how he will perform at Monaco because it is quite a tricky track. But I'm actually am going to say I think it could be someone other than Kimi this week, whether that's a McLaren or George or even like Chris said, a Ferrari. I think like it's going to be someone in that one of the top six spots. I don't think it's going to be Kimi, but it will be interesting to see. But that's just my kind of guess on that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we'll probably end up changing our mind if we do another preview podcast before Monaco. But yeah, at the time of recording, I'd quite like to see a George win and the DNF for Kimi, just purely for the titles championship race. We need we need a championship race.
I
So
will say one thing about that. Actually, it's a good point, Robin. Considering what Monaco qualifying has been like in the past, going to the absolute limit and seeing kind of Kimi, even though he's got fantastic pace, the erratic way he sometimes can go into corners, I would not be
yeah,
surprised if he absolutely shunted it in Q1 or in Q2.
you could
I wouldn't be
easily see
surprised
it.
if we had a really big crash for one of the younger drivers, in especially in these new cars, new way of deploying energy. I would not be surprised if we had a massive crash in Q1 or Q2.
I mean, yeah, like you say, like given some of the lockups that he had in the sprint, the quali, and also the race itself at Canada, you could easily see that, Chris. So yeah, I hope for the racing itself. I obviously don't wish ill on Kimi, but I just think for the championship we need a title race, and it would make life interesting if this narrative played out. But we'll have to see. But we've come to the end of today's episode. I'm really grateful to have Megan, as always, and obviously Chris, as our guest speaker today. Thank you so much to Chris for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it, Chris. And we'll
Pleasure
be
as
back.
always.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll be back, hopefully, Megan, won't we, with a sort of preview episode for the Monaco Grand Prix. I think we've got a few quizzes maybe lined up. We're going to have a discussion and see if we can make a fun episode pre-Monaco.
Wow. Fun
So yeah,
times.
Chris, we'll be in touch, and yeah, we'll be back soon, for the championship lap. Thanks, guys.